We are live. Thank you all who are joining us, going to be joining us, or going to be watching the VOD. I am, as everybody should know by this point, if you don't, how dare you, the T-Man. And today I have got two guests for us coming from my good old Discord. For the
I'll
past
watch
couple of days, they've been having a bit of a discussion on the concept of roleplay. Carlos, thank you for joining us. And so I've not been able to watch the whole thing because, well, work. Luckily, today is the final day for just mass filling every order I can to make sure it arrives in time for Christmas. And so now we got some time to actually dig down in it because I found at least the bits and pieces I saw interesting. I thought I'd make for a good show. And so we are here. So let me first of all adjust this so I'm in the center because I'm most important. All right, over to my left is Mr. Zeno Guy. Say hello.
Howdy there.
And to my left, Mr. Coldfrost.
Yo, yo, yo. I see you're doing the whole point counterpoint, being in the middle and just you can talk to either one of us and just be like, yes, yes.
Thumb Ungly says, cheers, gentlemen. Pleasure to hear y'all. I'll be ordering more tea to go with my Pathfinder first edition soon. Before we get into the fun stuff, what is everybody's favorite, TTRPG rulebook set?
Theoretically, right now, mine has to be Knave 2nd edition. I haven't been able to get it to the table yet, and it's coming out of its prototyping phase. The Kickstarter ended a while ago, but it is about as pure and stripped down an OSR experience as can be done while still being within the umbrella of the OSR.
That is a difficult question. The
reason that's a difficult question is because you have options.
Yes, because I've played a lot of games. # no games. No, I don't really have a specific rule set. I have favorite settings that, and in general, I like rule sets that reflect a setting. If I had to pick at least one and only one, storyteller. I actually, even though I'm not playing in a storyteller game right now, but which would be Old World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Ascension. Those are my two favorites of those, but also includes Werewolf Apocalypse and all the others as well. Hunter the Reckoning, stuff like that.
Oh, that's my newest mistake. I forgot to hit the play button on the background music. There we go.
Nice piano.
Chill. Turn it down just a little bit more. Okay.
Now we are sleep/study too.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, what originally was the catalyst that began you guys' conversation?
The thing that started us off was I mentioned something about one of the many TTRPG systems and talked about how I wasn't a massive fan of it because it was, in my opinion, options focused, as opposed to how I consider things roleplay focused. And what I mean by that is you can look at pretty much any TTRPG, and to my eye, they tend to fall on a spectrum between roleplay focused and options focused. Roleplay focused games are usually quicker to get to the table because you build a relatively simple character and then just start playing with them. You differentiate that character from other characters through roleplay, hence roleplay focus, as opposed to options focused games where you spend a lot more time pouring through books, picking out optimal different options to put onto the character sheet so that you have all this cool stuff your character can do, and then the game is just an exercise of going through those options that your character can do.
I see. And Mr. Goldfrost, you dissented?
Yes, because it's a false dichotomy. He's talking about the difference between rules light and rules heavy, and he's making a weird dichotomy saying roleplay versus options, which is a incorrect way to even begin to approach that, because that would mean assuming if they are on a spectrum, you could in theory have a game that is sole roleplay, no options, and a role-playing game that is all options no role play, and neither of those exist. Therefore, that spectrum is invalid.
The first false premise that you're coming with that is that you're assuming that what I'm talking about is analogous to rules light versus rules heavy, which it's entirely possible for there to be a role play focused game where your character sheet doesn't have a lot of options that is nonetheless extraordinarily rules heavy. Baseline EBA, I would say, falls under that, because if you are only doing the basic unpowered, probably modern EBA setting, all you have are attributes and some skills, but the rule set is still incredibly heavy. And you could have highly option-based games that have relatively simple rules. I don't have an example of that off the top of my head, because often a lot of options come with there being a lot of rules as well. But while they're related and definitely correlative, they aren't the same thing.
And again, that's where I disagree, because what you just described with the one was a rules light system, and
EBA
saying
is
it's
not a rules light system.
If it's a very simple, if it only
character
has
sheet is-
attribute,
the
which
character
would make
sheet
it
is simple.
rules light.
No, the character sheet is simple. The rules are not simple.
There's a lot of systems
back it
where the
up a little
character sheets
bit.
are very simple.
So, for those of us who are not initiated, such as myself,
Mhm.
describe EBA for somebody who knows TTRPG but just doesn't know EBA specifically.
EBA is a... If I had to describe it, I would say it's an evolution of GURPS. It's a system that's very simulationist, that's built to be able to handle any situation, and it has lots and lots of rules to be able to handle all of those situations. And one of the things that you can do is build lots of powers and options to put onto your character to handle different simulations of different settings. So you could have lots of fancy, weird guns, or in order to be a sci-fi setting, or lots of different magical powers to have a high or low fantasy setting. But if you play it in a relatively unpowered system, or a relatively unpowered setting, the only thing that you would have to put on your character sheet would be your attributes, which give you a base amount of dice, and then skills that would augment those. But then the stuff you can do with those attributes and skills has loads and loads of different rules systems that simulate a high degree of simulate the world with a high degree of mechanical fidelity, but in a way that uses relatively simple character sheets. That's why I'm drawing a dichotomy between rules light and rules heavy, and roleplay focused and options focused. I'm not talking about the actual rules of the game. I'm talking about what goes into building and building your character, and then differentiating your character from other characters.
Okay. Let me ask this.
Mhm.
So, if there is we'll just stick with D&D just because that's the one that everybody knows. Or Pathfinder, same, close enough.
Which edition of D&D?
See, that's the thing, is that old school D&D, basically everything pre first edition, so that would be white box and red box, I would argue is relatively options focused.
Red box is a first edition.
Different people disagree on what they call first edition. Most of the time when I hear people say first edition D&D, they mean advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, but advanced and basic where it came out at the same time, or similar.
Right, but they're definitely not the same game.
No.
So white box, red box would be an options focused game, and then advanced Dungeons and Dragons would be moving towards the OSR. So the white box and red box would be a roleplay focused game. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is moving towards the options focused, and then once you get to 3 and 3.5, you're well onto the options focused side of the spectrum. And then 5th edition, depending on the dungeon master and how you're playing it, can be either as options focused as 3.5 or more roleplay focused, but definitely more options focused than the OSR, the old school games.
Right.
And the big reason I disagree, again, not only with the fact that he keeps saying there's a spectrum, which there isn't. The other problem I have with him describing it this way and framing the the issue in this way is it throws out the idea and kind of ignores the relevant how everyone actually role plays games, where your character sheet, what you have on your character sheet defines how you're going to be able to role play your character. So there being options or not options is irrelevant because you're going to be role playing your character sheet no matter what. Because if you role play something that is not on your character sheet, then you aren't role playing correctly. Biggest example of that would be, let's say you're playing a game and you have D&D. Let's keep it very simple. D&D. You have a very low charisma, but on your sheet. But in real life, very charismatic person. You're able to talk through a lot of things, and instead of role playing your character with not being able to do that, you do that, which does happen a lot actually. That is not role playing the character because you're ignoring what's on your sheet. So you're not actually role playing at that point. You're just taking charisma to get benefits elsewhere.
Yeah, because there was this came up when I was doing Baldur's Gate 3 and making my character, where he is a fighter and was going to stay. Actually, he's going to be a fighter choice. Then I made him to a pure fighter, and I put points in charisma, even though charisma does nothing for the fighter. And I said, yes, I know that. However, for roleplay purposes, he has more charisma than most other fighters, which is why I put the extra points in there as opposed to whatever I took him out of. Let's say Constitution. So
you get to use those dialogue options.
Yes. So would you say he's a guy that somehow does not qualify as roleplay? Is it? How does that?
No, that is roleplay. That's putting the character. That's putting the attributes on the character that you want to roleplay as.
And the more options you have, the more things you have on your character sheet, the better you can roleplay.
I don't entirely agree with that because, well,
your character sheet doesn't. The character sheet determines your roleplay. So the more things you have available to do with your character determines how much more things you can roleplay. The character sheet's the foundation.
The character is the foundation, but it's not the end-all be-all.
No, but it's the foundation. It's what everything else is built on top of.
Right, but again, I don't see.
So if you have a very sparse character sheet, you have limits on what you can.
Now, if you have a sparse character sheet, that means you have to fill it in with roleplay that is based on the character.
Example. Something you've done in play with a sparse character sheet.
If you have a character sheet, which I'm Eternal DM, so I don't have immediate things that I've done to call to mind here.
Well, you've built NPCs, so
if you have a sparse character sheet, if you have a game which uses a sparse character sheet, then what you can do isn't defined by. You don't have to have a thing on the character sheet that says has baking skill. You can play a character that is a baker and roleplay as someone that is able to do baking as or is able to roleplay as a baker. And any good DM is going to give you whatever bonuses you need on. If you're rolling baking skill checks, you get to add that to it. That's one of the things that Knave 2nd edition uses, is to fill out the character sheet. One of the only options that you have is profession. In the Knave 2nd edition character sheet, you fill out your 6 attributes. You get 2 professions, and then you have equipment. The attributes are the base of everything that you do, and then the professions are just a little bit of a drop of. It's just enough options, and they are character options that give you a foothold for roleplay, and you can base roleplay off of that. That is as opposed to something like Shadowrun, where you just fill the character sheet up with addictions or particular abilities,
Stuff you can
or
roleplay. Yeah.
minor bonuses. Yes, and those are all things that you can roleplay. But what I'm saying is that with a roleplay focused system, you don't have to write down on your character sheet that you get a +2 bonus to climbing. You just are a character that has a background or a profession that would make you better at climbing, and then that's part of your roleplay.
Let me see if I can.
And then the DM can give you whatever bonuses are necessary to make that impactful if it is necessary to do so.
I think I might understand. Let me see if this is correct. So in a game which has a huge multitude of options, it runs into the risk of having so many options that if you don't choose something, you end up running into the problem of, well, you didn't choose this, so how can you say that you're actually good at it when it was already an option to choose, which ends up limiting your actual roleplay. So for the baking example, let's say there is a baking-related feat or skill, but you did not choose anything to relate to the said baking feat or skill. And if you try and roleplay that into your game, the DM has to say, no, you can't actually do that because this is the feat, this is the skill, and you didn't choose it. Am I on the right path for that?
That's one of the downsides, is that if you want to do a certain character, you have to pick exactly the things that build into that character. I think
which that isn't a downside. That's not a bug. That's a feature.
It's a potential downside. If you play your character optimally, then yes, it's not a downside. But I think really the crux of the disagreement is, Cold, that I think you and I disagree about what we mean by roleplay, in that I'm in the
You're playing a character.
Yes.
And the character role.
But the character should be more than what's on the character sheet.
Yes, but that's their baseline.
Yes, it's the baseline, but you don't have. I don't think.
If you have a character that's a wizard, and you never cast magic, and you only use a sword, are you a wizard? And are you role playing a wizard correctly at that point?
I don't see how that goes afoul of what I'm talking about, because the option.
It's not everything, and there are different species between wizards, but the baseline, just like if you are in a play, an actor can interpret the character that he is acting as differently, but the baseline is still that character that's written in that has written lines and stage directions.
And that's equally true. What you're saying is equally true in roleplay based games versus roleplay focused games versus options focused games.
Gloria Zote over on Rumble says, this is a what are you versus who are you. You can be more than just a wizard. You're still a person.
Yes. Which I don't disagree with. However, when you're playing a game, the game part of it requires you to make certain conceits and fill certain roles. If you're just ad-libbing and role-playing with nothing, then you're not role-playing. You're not doing a role-playing game. You're improving, which there's nothing wrong with improv, but you've eliminated all the gaming conceits.
So, yes, and I agree with you, and that's why it's a spectrum and not binary.
But on a spectrum, that's again brings it back to, it can't be a spectrum if you can't point to the extremes of the spectrum and then still be considered role-playing games. The extreme of all options in your definition would be a board game, and the extreme of no options, all role play would be improv. But those are not role-playing games at that point. Therefore, that spectrum doesn't apply to role-playing games.
Would you say that there are role-playing games that are more similar to improv?
I would say that all of them, to a certain extent, have improv elements.
So there are some games that are more like improv and some games that are less like improv.
No. Because if you're doing any role playing at all, you're going to be doing off the cuff stuff no matter what, because that's how that you don't have your lines written for you. Even in the most option heavy system in the world, your lines aren't written for you. You still have to improv.
Right.
You're
But are
not
there some
improving
games- are there some games where you're doing-
you're not improving the game aspects ever, because those games have because the game part has set defined rules. It
Right.
is a marriage of the two that they can't be separated. They are one. Role playing games are a complete synthesis of improv and board game.
Right.
And
But some of them can have more of one and less of the other, or more of the other and less of one.
Some can try to focus on one and will reward one or the other. However, in my experience, because I've played and ran way too many games, no matter what, even if a system is designed, like storytellers are really good, because storytellers extremely rules light. Not to the extreme of like fatal is not fatal. What's fudge dice? Fate. Thank you. Fatal's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah, let's not talk about Fatal. Actually, we're still on YouTube, right?
It's got a great first encounter, Xenu guy. What are you talking about?
No.
But even with that, as soon as some mechanics will always eventually come into play hard, because there's a lot of, especially like I was involved in a lot of LARPing Old World Darkness games, and when you're at a LARP, most of the time you are doing more improv stuff up until if combat happens, and then it comes
to a screeching halt.
Yeah, which that tends to go for a lot of systems tend to come to screeching halt with combat in general, unless they unless they make really clean rules for combat.
Very abstract. You just kind of roll a few dice and then decide how it. You roll a few dice to see who won, and then you just decide how anybody won.
Yeah,
Fate does a lot of that, actually.
Yeah, which there are pros to that and cons.
I don't hate Fate, but
it's like Blades of the Dark with me. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is that you have some games that are focusing more in the direction of the improv side of the game, there are some games that are focusing more mechanically.
The theater kids have always tried to make it, always try to focus more on the improv. The problem is not everyone's a theater kid, so then you have the because I mean, everyone argues with this dichotomy, but I think it's actually fairly accurate. The four main types of gamers: you have role players, which would be more the theater kids. You have power gamers, which are the people that learn all the rules to exploit and to exploit their things to the greatest, and they have a power fantasy, which is a fine way to play it. You have the adventurer who just really wants to find more out stuff about the world, and then you have the story guy who's just obsessed with like, oh, where's the story going?
Yeah, it's basically the TTRPG version of
TMNT. Everyone, the four humors.
But it's also the TTRPG version of the Timmy Johnny Spike division. There's just one more because Magic the Gathering doesn't have roleplay as much as it is very similar. And you have what's weird stuff, because like Legend of the Five Rings was a card game first and then became a tabletop role-playing game, so that added a whole new dichotomy to stuff as well. So I think that the main issue that you and I have is that you're saying that a spectrum can't exist because there isn't. If you go all the way to one side, you're not playing in.
Yeah.
If you go all the way to one side of the spectrum, it's not an RPG, and if you go all the way to the other side, it's also not an RPG. I don't think that means that the spectrum doesn't exist.
I think you are viewing tabletop games through a lens of a very specific player type, which is fine. A lot of people do that because most people will always think in the of what I want to get out of games. But the problem with that is any other player type looks at it and goes, "Well, that's incorrect." And
All right,
that's my where a going more rules light and then making arguments why you would like rules light versus rules heavy would be more an accurate way to frame the discussion and get, because it's a more neutral and not so based in a specific perspective.
All right, let me do this and see if there is more understanding if I give out a specific example. I decide I'm going to play D&D, I don't know, 5.0 since that's the latest one.
Mm-hmm.
I decide I am going to be a fighter. And since I'm a fighter, I look up all the min-maxing that a fighter does. I know I'm not going to need charisma, so I can just go ahead and dump that, put everything into strength and constitution. I'm going to wait full plate, so I'm not going to do any dexterity. Between intelligence and wisdom, I'm going to see which one affects me the most if the enemy attacks me, and I'll go with that. And so I do that as my, I guess, secondary dump stat. At that point, am I a role player, or am I just doing the options thing, Xeno guy?
Well, the spectrum that I'm looking at isn't about how an individual player approaches a game. I'm talking about the game systems themselves.
Game systems themselves, okay.
So you could definitely be role-playing somebody. You could take all of those decisions and then role-play somebody who is focused on being the absolute best full-plate fighter he can be. That doesn't take away from role-play. It's a specific kind of roleplay, and you can also not roleplay and just try and be wargaming and taking advantage of all the options. Yeah. None of those interact with the spectrum that I'm talking about.
Personally, I'm not a fan of min-maxing, which is why I decided to use it as the example. So let's go ahead. If we're gonna let's stick with
a lot of people aren't fans of min-maxing, but
you get the spikes.
Well, not only that, it depends. Certain systems either reward that or discourage it, and in general, it is a way to play it. The more difficult parts are, it's as the GM, you're supposed to kind of figure out what your players are and kind of tailor whatever game you're trying to run to all the types, which is difficult, but that's what you're supposed to do.
All right, let's use a specific example since we're talking about D&D 5.0. Xeno, would you call that options or roleplay?
I think that 5e leans more towards the options. Not anywhere near as something like GURPS or Shadowrun, but it's more options focused than a lot of other games. And when I say a lot of other games, I'm mostly talking about OSR games. And like I said, rules light and RP focused in my conception are correlative, but not absolutely so.
I would describe, using your dichotomy, I would describe actually D&D 5.0 as role play, because there's nothing to grab onto.
Right, and
that is why I bounce off of 5.0.
And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that you prefer a lot of the more options focused games. So that's your baseline. And see, the problem is that you're going to say, no, I like a lot of more roleplay focused games, like World of Darkness. But in my baseline is so far to the roleplay side that to me, World of Darkness feels like an options focused game.
And see, whenever you talk about Knave, mostly because the setting's boring as all hell. I literally go,
it's not a setting. It barely has any setting at all. It's just the game engine.
Exactly. I don't like games that are just game engine. I don't like rules bereft of settings in general.
Right. I tend to like them because you can apply them to the different settings that you want.
Which
It's just a different style of DMing.
which I mean which is fine, but every time I've seen those games, I like long campaigns, and a lot of those games are more built for one shots.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And that's I like to role play a character and having a long progression of stuff, ventures and trials and tribulations and overcoming them. Or I mean, I have characters that I have played for 4 or 5 years in a campaign, which I am an exception on that. Most because like I think when they did the studies on like D&D and stuff, most people don't ever get past like level like 11.
Barely any get past level 5.
Yeah,
and a lot of that's the normification of D&D. Because when they say most, they mean the normies. which
I mean, if that's how you want to play the game, fine. I'm not here to yuck on anyone's yum, but I like to play. I enjoy long games. Hence, I've played with people that have played characters for 20 years.
Yeah,
I feel that's a little extreme.
I think that's another issue that you and I are having is that I'm not saying that you don't role play characters in options focused games. You still do, and you definitely do role play into those options. To me, I'm trying to look at it from a perspective of the system itself and what the system was focused on bringing about. And you still obviously role play in Shadowrun. It's just you build the character first and then you role play. Whereas with something like Knave, the character is a lot more open to definition by the role playing itself.
I think my main problem, I have many main problems. If I keep saying my main problem, then it is no longer a main problem. What I'm saying is, I think we're disagreeing on language less than the actual underlying. So, issue. Like, if you take Knave versus Shadowrun, because this is the thing we're stuck in now, I guess. It is a lot easier for someone to do all right, I made my character, wake me up when combat happens, versus Shadowrun, where for a lot of the positives and negative qualities, you have to at least create some sort of backstory, and it forces you to have a little bit more buy-in to role playing your character. As with Knave, you can literally can just walk up and go, well, tell me when combat starts. That's because I'm playing a fighter. So
I think that it's equally easy to do that in both systems.
I think
it's really
one
easy
incentivizes one more than the other.
Maybe.
How about this for me trying to just poke more into the whole thing and see if we can get a clear understanding? So, options-based system would be stuff that has a lot of things in which you can choose before the game begins. Meanwhile, roleplay has very little to choose from, giving you the option to just go willy-nilly what you want. Is this on the right track?
Go right into the role playing, yes. And the reason that I use Knave and Shadowrun as the examples for that is because in the system I'm playing, or in the game that I'm playing that Soul is running right now, I've literally spent more time building my character than I have playing my character. And in Knave, when I generated to make that exact point a minute ago, or the other day, I built a Knave character from scratch between sending messages to show the example of the character sheet. That's the difference. The focus of the Knave character is to get into the game and roleplay. The focus of the Shadowrun character is to sit down and pour through books and pick cool stuff and then think about how cool it would be to be able to do the thing. And then the game is just the payoff of getting in and doing the cool thing that you picked out that you would want to do.
So the options-focused games, the main thing is giving you a lot of things to choose from to what you can do. Meanwhile, the RPG or the role-playing focused games give you very little, and let's just figure it out on your own, basically.
It's more of that, yes. And that might be a deficiency on my part of me sucking at playing the options focused games that I just can't get into the actual game and do the thing right. That I'm completely open to that. All of the points I'm making are from a personal analytical point of view. This is one of the ways in which when I'm looking at a game system, I try to think to myself, is this an options focused game or is this a roleplay focused game, so that I know how to approach it. I've had multiple experiences where I've started reading a rule set thinking that it's roleplay based, and then when I actually get into trying to play it, it turns out to be a lot more options based, and that affected how I approached the whole thing. If I had approached it as an options based system from the get-go, I would have had a lot more fun with it. Right. Because I would have built it that way.
Right, Mr. Coldfrost, based on Xenoguy's definition from right now, just from his definition, slash the description I gave, I guess, which do you prefer in those definitions?
Using those definitions, options, because I hate to fall back on use the logical fallacy of I have a lot of experience, but I've had a lot of experience playing different systems.
Yeah, and all of this is based on our experience, so it's fully valid in this situation.
I've had a lot of experience playing different systems, knowing people that have played different systems and DM'd or played in different systems. And one thing that a lot of what is terminology called in the RPG community, the theater kid problem, which they have valid points on some things, but what they don't understand on, because a lot of systems where they try to get rid of what they consider non-useful rules, which there are systems where there are sometimes rules just for rules' sake, but when you try to make a system that's very, very rules light, the problem becomes when you have players or DMs, because I've hit this both ways, that go, well, there's not a rule for that, so you can't do it.
Here's a situation that happened,
and that is very
that is bad. That's just bad. If you have a game that says there's not a rule to do this, so you can't do it, that's a bad game. And
no, that's not the game. That's the DM or the players.
Right. And if you have a DM that says, well, I don't see it in the book, and so you can't do it, that's a bad DM.
And you also have, if you DM rule light systems, you'll have on the opposite end, you'll have players that go, well, there's no rule against it. Right. And that's it's one of those things where rules and you can take this way too far, and you can have like stuff like GURPS or Palladium where they get really clunky, and you go and a lot of versions of Shadowrun to a certain extent also have this problem, which is why some people have tried to clean it up to different degrees of success. The thing that rules allow you to do is because, well, in general, TTRPGs are kind of playing them as kind of a social contract. And when you have more written out rules saying what the game is, what it's trying to do, and here's the rules to do this thing of what we're trying to do, then you have more things on the onset binding players and DMs to that specific game style.
Yes.
Which is very helpful in generals.
Yes, I agree with that.
Let me ask this nice little rules question then. So a friend of mine made a campaign many years ago in which the TLDR, another friend was doing a paladin. We fought a bunch of things that we thought were demons. We ended up killing them, but it turns out that it was actually an illusion. They were just innocent villagers. The paladin player was really upset because, according to him, since he killed innocents, he has to now lose his paladin powers. But DM says, well, since you didn't know, then it's not really evil. Which way would you go with the rules with that?
In my opinion, it should depend on the religion that the paladin himself was subscribed to. The religion's philosophy would determine whether he would lose his paladin powers or not, because paladin powers come from the deity, and so it really is up to the capricious whims of the deity as to whether you lose it or not.
Which version of D&D were you playing?
Exactly. Not only which version of D&D were you playing, but which of the D&D deities was the paladin too?
3.5.
Well,
That was the
to be
latest
fair,
out.
3.5, you weren't tied to a deity; you were tied to the plane of law and good.
Which is just a abstract way of saying that the plane of law is the deity.
Yeah, but in general, I would, if in a vacuum, I would say no, but I would encourage the player to, even though they still have their paladin powers. I mean, no matter what, that's going to shake the very It's going to shake that character to a foundation. Where
for me,
or even if he hasn't lost his paladin powers, he may not feel that he's worthy to use them because of what happened.
Yeah,
which would be an interesting role play aspect, but by rules, I wouldn't necessarily say that I wouldn't say that he lost them because he didn't know.
For me, and I would go the opposite way, mostly because unless the paladin is devoted to a god that definitely would not have taken the powers away because they didn't know, I would take the powers away just because that would make for interesting role play, because then they either have to make do without their paladin powers, and a paladin is just a fighter with paladin powers, but they're a much worse fighter.
Well, it
So
also depends on what level, if it's useful.
Yeah.
If they're like level 11, you just go, all right, so I walk into town and pay for atonement, back on the road.
There's also that. And here's something, so I would take the powers away, and then you have role play opportunities of either going without them or getting them back. But what I would say is that there would be systems where being a paladin and losing your paladin powers would be counted as an option. So if we were thinking of something that I don't know of systems like this, so I'll use Shadowrun as an example. You could take a negative quality and get karma or whatever, or have to pay off a karma debt. Karma being the Shadowrun equivalent of experience points, and that would make that an option. Whereas in something like 3.5, you just roleplay it.
Yeah, there are actually systems where almost any system that has positive negative quality built in, which is also known as merits and flaws in other systems,
perks and drawbacks.
Yeah, a lot of those systems that's generally encourages you, if as a GM, if something equivalent to that happens, you'd get a negative quality.
Yeah, and to my mind, that's a perfect example of roleplay versus options focused. In the systems where it isn't options focused, you just roleplay that you lost your powers, and you would note on your character sheet, I'm not allowed to use this right now. Whereas in an options focused system, you would take that option and then slot it into the character sheet, and then see what that changes on or what other options you would take to offset it. It's a difference in approach.
See, I disagree with you on that one, because you're role playing on either end. You're role playing
on both of them. You are role playing on one of them.
On one, it's
focus.
On one. If you want to, let's say you want to continue as a fallen paladin, unless the system has the option to play as that, you basically are taking a negative and actively hindering your entire party for role play, which no one likes. No one likes to have the guy dragging the rest of the. We all have played with the person who's like, guys, I'm role playing. It's like, you're role playing uselessness. I need you to do something useful.
Yes, and I agree with that. And I agree with that. And the role play shouldn't come in front of the game. But I don't think that the answer to that is you have to have options in order to offset it. I think that you can role play.
I think you should have options system wise to make it so that you can continue role playing that character, but not have them useless to the party.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think that in roleplay focused systems, you can find a way of making that work. Using something other than by using just the roleplay and having the DM do whatever is necessary to, give you whatever boost you need to still be useful, but with the focus on the roleplay as opposed to the focus on the options. Both of them have options. You have attributes that you've picked for both, and both of them have roleplay. After you take your negative quality of being a fallen paladin, you have to roleplay that. But to me, the difference is one of them focuses on the roleplay and one of them focuses on the options.
The problem with doing it in a system that doesn't have those spelled out is two big issues. One, you have to trust your DM, and everyone else has to trust your DM. Because
Yes.
I know a lot of games where DMs well, there's not a rule for it, so they kind of make one up, and that ends up getting favoritismed, and
Yes.
the players get really turned off by that. And the opposite end of the spectrum of that is a DM going, no, you're taking your
There's not a thing in the book for that, so you can't do that.
yeah, or just no, you lost these things, and therefore feel the punishment.
Yeah, you don't get the whatever options you would need to offset.
Yeah, and
I agree.
yeah, and that's why the rules having spelled out rules takes away a lot of those edge cases that happen more often than not.
Well, so let me ask this:
Especially
with those-
if you're a very inexperienced DM, and you've never DM before, and you come to the situation there isn't a rule for it, and you have to make up on the spot. That's generally where bad calls get made, because you just don't know, you don't have the experience.
Yes,
So I'm-
definitely.
let me ask this in terms of those fringe cases. Let's say you're playing an evil paladin or evil cleric, and whatever god you're with, the rules in the book for more options focused for Xenocast definition, the rules in the book say if you end up doing a good deed out of, happy feelings, you lose my powers. And a player who kind of forgets about that, slash, I guess, roleplays forgets about that, ends up doing a good deed, and somebody brings up, hey, in the rulebook, this says that you now lose your powers. If the DM says, well, it says this in the rulebook, but screw it, we're going to let you keep your powers, would that be a good DM? Or would that be somebody who is doing bad because he's going against some clearly laid out rules in the book?
I think it'd be a bad DM to let that person make that character.
Yeah, that would be a bad. I think that would be a bad DM.
Because if you're define evil as always doing negative things, that means one player it has to be a dick to the entire party and everything else all the time. It's like, no, you can't create that. Why? Because
It's bad for the game.
No, none of us want to deal with you being a dick the entire time. So even allowing that character to exist would be would be problematic as a DM. Sometimes you have to tell players, no, that's not no.
Right, lawful good paladin, if he ends up hurting anybody innocent and he loses powers, he's at a bar, he's slightly tipsy, he rolls very poorly on some kind of a check, and so he angrily takes his mug and slams it over the head of somebody. Rules clearly state if you hurt an innocent, you lose your powers, and the DM says, well, you were drunk, so blah blah, I'll go ahead and ignore it. Good or bad call?
If the rules say that in that situation you should lose the powers, I think that enforcing that makes for better roleplay.
Yeah, because
actions have to have consequences.
Exactly.
Okay, so
you can't just, especially if you're playing a paladin, which is held up to such a high in system and in settings. Paladins, there's such a high standard that they're supposed to live up to, because you're a paladin and you don't live up to that standard. Yeah, there should be a consequence.
Because if you don't do that, do you want murder hobos? Because that's how you get murder hobos.
It's one of those things where, in general, if people want, and this actually comes up a lot, where especially in game design, I've heard a lot of game developers say for tabletop RPGs they won't put certain options in the game, because if an option is there, it's the same way with, like, you don't stat out gods, because if you stat something out, players are going to kill it. If you give rules for something, players are going to want to use them.
Right.
So continuing
and the other thing, the thing though, I would say though, T-Man, is that our answers to that don't hinge on whether the game is options focused or roleplay focused. In my conception, that's equally, what I'm talking about is a way of analyzing and categorizing game systems, not actions within a game.
So going on with my next question then. So let's say the rulebook has specifically laid out rules of what the paladin needs to do in order to get back his powers. For more options focused, it'd be trying to follow the rules of the book to do what you need to get your powers back, and roleplay focus would be you guys talk it over, figure out what this paladin needs to do. So far, is that a correct characterization?
I think that's more of a dichotomy between rules light and rules heavy, because in a rules heavy game there would be more stringently defined exactly what a paladin has to do, and in a rules light it would be more
Hand
focused
wavy.
on basically.
I see.
And there's benefits to both system. There's benefits and drawbacks to both.
It depends on what type of game you're wanting to run,
Exactly.
and what type of players you know you're gonna have.
Yeah, like I
That's
really
why
want-
I really don't like general universal systems. I used to for a while. I was a big fan of them, and a lot of the positives of universal systems over time they lost a lot of luster, because I like the rules to reflect the setting, and if in a universal system they can't do that, so you either have to do a lot of work as a DM in your story to make the rules reflect the setting, or you have weird stuff happen where players ignore how the setting's supposed to work and go off what the rules say instead.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think that all of those very general universal systems, I don't like using them as straight games themselves. I like using them as frameworks to build a game with a particular setting.
But that's why I like my favorite systems tend to be here. We made a rule set for, and there are systems that have rules specifically built, settings built, rules built for their setting, where it's not done the best. And Shadowrun is one of those. I love the setting, but there are problems with the rules, as opposed to Storyteller reflects its setting very well, to people's chagrin or enjoyment, and so does Earth Dawn. And then if you go back to AD, if you go back to,
I would say Vampire is another good. From my limited exposure to it, the rules reflect the setting fairly well.
yeah, because well, Vampire specifically was a lot of theater kids that came together. It's like, well, how do we make these people that enjoy the power gaming and the crunch? How do we force them to role play? that was kind of how that system got built.
I think that we figured out the answer to that. Goth chicks. Bring in the goth chicks, and the power gamers will do whatever they have to.
So many goth chicks, and I don't dislike it. But yeah, that's, and then you have like Savage Worlds is actually good for the settings it was built that it spawned out of, because a lot of the rules still in the Savage Worlds set come from like Deadlands, and you can see where they came from Deadlands. But in general, I don't even like AD&D. It's a generalized system, but like
it has a lot of setting built right into it with how the classes work and magic items.
Well, not only that, if I pull out my Dark Sun box sets, they actually have specific setting rules that goes, nope, here's the classes, here's how they work for AD&D second edition. Here's how you should roll stats differently here, and it almost
changes it into a different game. It just
almost
uses AD&D as the framework.
Exactly, which you can do that with the universal system but that has to be a published material. If you use a universal system and you want to make a setting and you want them to reflect it, you have to do so much work as a GM.
Yes, I agree with that. It is as somebody that tried to make that work with Fate, it is a shitload of work.
And it's one of those things of like, at least for me, when I run games, I get inspired by what I read. And same thing when I make a character, I get inspired by what I read. Even if I'm like, a lot of stuff early on was like when I wasn't reading a lot of D&D, but I got into Pathfinder 1D. It was just people I've watched on TV and stuff. Like I like that character. I want to play that character. I want to role play that character. And now it tends to be I read a system and I go, oh, this is how the setting works. This is going on. Oh, I think I can do this story. These characters would be interesting as NPCs for players to meet. And that's so when I read a universal system, I have none of that, and I just go, why would I use this?
Right. It's the difference between a Lego set that builds something and a box of miscellaneous Legos.
Yeah.
Theoretically, you could build the set out of a box of miscellaneous Legos, but it's going to be a lot harder.
It's gonna be a lot, and you have to, and if you don't have the framework, yeah, you can, but if you,
but also the framework is probably bad because it's not a good framework for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and even then, would you even have the idea to build that in a vacuum, without being something to bounce to be inspired by, or would you just build something else completely different, or go, I don't feel like building anything right now because I have the box, but I could do whatever with that whenever.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And that I do like a lot of those systems that are more built into their setting. I just haven't had the chance to do much with them recently.
I get that. I started running an Earth Dawn game, and I'll be running a Dark Sun game here soon too, because I have problems with time management.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Luckily, the system that I'm excited about in that direction isn't out yet, so I don't have that problem just yet. But
I've been reading through and absorbing Earth Dawn since I think January of last year, and that's how long I've been building that, and I've about 6 months working through Dark Sun and just going, oh, I want to do something, but even then, I've learned how many games I can run and be a part of. So it's one of those things of, I know how often I can run without getting burnout, and as long as I keep getting inspired, and I don't have to. One of the worst thing, though, anyone who's GM knows the worst thing about GMing is being everyone's dad.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to be when you're a GM, is like, all right, so this is when game is. Who's going to be there? Because if you don't do that, people will just not show up and go, hey, where is it? Oh, there was a game? Well, yeah, this game is like every other week at this time. What do you mean there's a game?
All right. Let me ask this clever setup question to trap you into a trap. Xeno guy, is there any... Let me properly word this. Is it possible for a roleplay focused game to be too loose with its rules?
Oh, 100%. Fate definitely is. I would argue Blades in the Dark is, but that's probably just because I don't like Blades in the Dark. Yes, and like I said, if you go all the way down the spectrum that I'm talking about, you wind up at everybody sitting in a circle in folding chairs, improvising at each other, and that is not an RPG anymore. And if you come one step up from that, where everybody flips a coin to see if they're able to do a thing, then
God, so stupid.
Maybe you could say that's a role-playing game because you're having to do a thing, but that's awful. That's horrible. And I'm not even arguing that between a role-play focus and options focus, which one's better. I tend to prefer the option or the role-play focus because I've had more fun with them, but I see the appeal of the options focused games, and I really want to enjoy them because I do enjoy flipping through those books and seeing cool stuff. It is fun. I haven't had as much fun with it as I wish I had.
Using your dichotomy, one of the problems that can happen with options games is, and this happened famously this is what caused the fall of TSR, was you end up having rules printed for the sake of selling more books.
Yep.
And you're just like, well, did we need this? On the other hand, you have the famous in certain RPG spaces, the famous Merchants of Rokugan debacle, where you go, oh, we're going to have rules on how to play a merchant in Rokugan, and you get none of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, no, it's actually about the secret society that's been here the whole time. It's like, I didn't want this. I wanted to learn how to be a merchant.
That sounds awful. Please kill me.
Yeah, it was famously hated for that.
And the reason I brought it up is something that's seeming to be more and more famously hated. It's going to probably go down in history as one of the most hated systems. Is Critical Role's new RPG, the Candela Obscura. Yes, both of you were. Or you were not part of knowing what was going on with that?
I've not even looked at it. I really don't care about Critical Role in general.
Yeah. I'm watching it through very thick glass because I think it's funny.
It's one of those. If people like watching other people role play, as someone that made one of those channels way back when, though I did it to actually review RPG games, I I don't want to yuck on their yum, or shit in their cereal bowl. But me personally, I don't enjoy listening or watching other people roleplay. I'd rather be doing it.
No, I'm the same way. I've tried to watch multiple people, including people I generally enjoy. I just can't.
It's one of those things where I'd rather do it. And then I know a lot of people say, well, we don't have the opportunity to. Anytime I've not had the opportunity to and I've wanted to do something, I will
make it happen.
I'm stupidly bullheaded.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But with respect to the Candela Obscura, I don't know. I haven't read it. I'm not going to read it. I didn't spend any money. I'm not downloading the quick start guide. That's just not a thing I'm going to do. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably
what's the setting, or is it a generalist system?
It's basically Blades in the Dark. Honestly, let's be perfectly. It's the whole thing's basically Blades.
Someone
in the Dark.
tried to. I use Blades in the Dark as an example because it's in the zeitgeist. But when the couple people that tried to get me to play Blades in the Dark, when they described it to me, I went, well, that doesn't sound fun, and then immediately ignored it. went on my own business.
You're not wrong.
It's because I mean, you both have. Zeno has met me on the internet a lot, and then T-Man, we've met in person, and we've also been on the internet all the time. I'm extremely opinionated, and if something does not, if I go, I don't like that, I don't go, well, I'll give it a try. I'll go, and then I'd rather do something else, and then go do something else.
And that's why you're able to run. That's why you're just barely able to run all of the games that you do, is that you don't spend any time with stuff that you don't want to do in the first place.
Well, if I don't want to do it, why would I do it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why is a word never been spoken?
Calendar Obscura is so obscured that it doesn't even have hit points. You just roll 6-sided dice, and I guess if you roll low enough, you just kind of die-ish.
No, you get a scar, and then you don't even like get worse. You move attributes from one place to another, so you're still this. And on net, you're the same, but you're supposed to be different. It's. But here's the thing, that isn't speaking to it being options or not. That's not speaking to it being options or roleplay focused, in my opinion. That's it being soft, which is that's a completely different spectrum.
I mean, I can see people that I've roleplayed with have of a certain persuasion liking a game like that because they'd rather do a lot of talking, and combat is well, why would I do combat if I can talk my way out of it? Which I tend to play social characters anyway, so I understand that, but I do it from a different perspective. Because they look at the role play as paramount as opposed to a larger part of a thing. Same thing with a problem with, like, you can, if you've ever had a story DM where they're really obsessed with this really great campaign. Man, I have this really great campaign idea and this overarching plot, and there's going to be all these cool NPCs and stuff. And then you have the player who goes, yeah, but I made a character that doesn't care about that, so we're going to go do this. And then the DM go, well, no, here are rails. You are now going to be, because I have the story that I'm going to tell.
Yeah, and that can be a problem in any game. Yeah,
it's a problem in any game. But that's a lot of what I see in system design is it's one player, it's one type of person in RPGs looking at another person's type of style of doing things and going, that's wrong. I need to make something that shows them how wrong they are, and they don't understand that's not the greatest way to design a system.
Yeah, that's how you get Sword Dream.
Yeah, it's a lot of them. Like there is Earth Dawn. I love Earth Dawn, but the first edition was designed as a refutation of Dungeons and Dragons, because a lot of it was, well, why are you going to the dungeons? You're going to it gave you reasons to do things, which I like, and so you can have things, look at things and refute them well. You just got to know why exactly you don't like them and why it might be better to do something a different way from other people's perspectives other than your own.
It's like
which is hard to do.
It's like music. You have to know why it's a rule before you can break it well.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't just look. Yeah. Anything. It's like if you're writing a book, or because if you're writing a book, writing a movie, writing TV, if you got to know what you're clashing against to properly subvert it. If you want to do that, and you have to have a reason to subvert it outside of, look, guys, it's a subversion. It's like, well, first off, it's not really a subversion. Second of all, you did that to think you're clever, and you're not, because again, it's not actually a subversion.
What if Superman was bad though?
Yeah, and it's like, well, first of all, that's been done several times, and they've been done really well. What are you doing differently than they didn't do, or are you just repeating either to a lesser extent what other people have done? It's actually why I like Mark Millar. Everyone loves Secret Wars, but Secret Wars is literally just a retelling of DC's Kingdom Come, but worse.
I'm sure I would be amazed if I dug into comics of how much X is Y but worse. I'm 100%.
And not to say Secret Wars is not Civil War is bad, but it's one of those things where you look at it and go, I see where all the influences are.
All right, over on Rumble, Mr. Glorious Zote has a question. Do you think it's better to have your party be composed of like-minded characters, or is it better if your characters often have opposing viewpoints / goals?
It takes a mix. The characters have to be they have to be.
There has to be a reason why they're together.
Yeah, they have to be similar enough that they're all in the same place, going the same direction. But if they're all the same character, then I mean, at that point, you're just playing Baldur's Gate with a bunch of functionally interchangeable mechanical set pieces.
You have to have a reason why you are adventuring together, in general, adventuring together. It's why a lot of when I've ran into older RPG players, and I even to a certain extent do this as well, is I'll always come up for a reason why I'm working with a party, because if you going more into the role play side, you want to have that answer. Otherwise, eventually go, why am I with these people? I want to do this, and start to even subconsciously veer off to try to do your own thing. Yeah. It's why I've actually retired characters, because in games where I went, well, everything this character wanted to do with the party is basically complete, and so he is retired, and I'm going to make a new character. And some people will like, well, why are you? Because some people still also believe that no, you made a character, you got to play that till this is over. And it's like, no, yeah, the goals he has is done. There's no reason for me to play this. I will start pulling away from what everyone else wants to do if you don't let this character retire, just because he has new goals now.
Yeah, that's why when I'm running, I like to build into the campaign, at least the start of the campaign, that the characters are already working together for some reason. That way we can speed run that part of it, as opposed to we all meet in a tavern, and the only reason that this set of chuckle nuts walks out together is because they're being controlled by people sitting around a table in another another plane of existence.
It's one thing that is a good idea to bring up in a session 0 is like, why are you all working together? However, the problem with that is you assume that everyone is also into that roleplay mindset, and if they're to a certain extent, if they're not actively in that mindset, they'll just go, well, why can't we just meet at a tavern? Because they haven't really figured out their character, because they haven't really played it yet to know how it's played it to how and reacted as that character yet to know really what it's all about.
Yeah, and in cases like that, it's good to just give them a baseline. Well, you were selected by this person to do this thing, and that's all if they're not in character enough, then that's enough to get them on the right path.
A lot of TTRPG stuff is a lot of art, not science. It's a lot of hitting something, in your experience, hitting something and going, I need to change how I do that, because now I know what I was doing wrong. Or people, older people, because I've ran into a lot of older, like one of my early GMs was a guy that's been doing stuff for 20 years before. Actually, he's older than my dad. doing things for a while, and I would go, well, why is he doing things this way? And this doesn't always correlate, but then you start doing your own GM, you go, that's why he was doing it that way.
Yeah,
because some people can't articulate why they do things in a specific way.
I think that most people can't. That's why we need things like big rule sets and advice books. A lot of the time when you're reading a book of advice, it's all, for some people, it's all new to them and it'll help them a lot. For a lot of people, you already know everything in the book. You just needed it to be put into words.
It's the famous question of, why is the section here of what is a role-playing game? We all know what a role-playing game is, except for the people that don't know what a role-playing game is.
Yeah, everybody knows, except for the ones who need to know.
Exactly.
Right. With that, let me ask this. I'll go to both of you. What is your favorite TTRPG system, and how would you sell it to somebody who knows nothing about it?
I would sell if I was a humble game store merchant, trying to sell my wares to the person walking in my game store. I wouldn't necessarily sell them one system. I would legitimately ask them what they like. Like, what do they want to? What type of TV shows do they like to watch? What type of video games they like to watch? Get a decent idea of stuff. Like, let's say they're a weeb and they love either anime or like just the history of like they're big fan of the Three Kingdoms era or the Sengoku era or something like that.
Definitely not talking about anybody here.
No, definitely. But like,
what do you think, Musashi? Are they talking about someone specific?
But that would infer that you like playing, that you like that stuff. So, and that would be different if you like anime, because there are systems that are all about replicating the anime stuff. Big Eye, Small Mouth is famous for that. But
is it good though?
I've never played it. Krez has the books. I've read through them, and I went, I don't want to play a high schooler. This is weird.
Okay, yeah, that's
I played it once like 15 years ago, so I don't have the best.
I would, but if you're like more of a fan,
anime is a very particular feeling that's hard to replicate on tabletop.
But if you're like the more history stuff, then I would suggest Legend of the Five Rings, which may have a name similar to a book that is also about something of Five Rings, and because that setting and the system is very easy to learn. It's not that difficult, and the setting is basically Sengoku era / Three Kingdoms era fantasy Asia, because you have an emperor and clans.
You're really not answering the question asked, because it was, what is your favorite system and how would you sell?
That's the problem. I don't I have a what am I in the mood for and what's inspiring me right now. That's my problem with what is my favorite system. I have
your favorite system is
6
the pantry.
shelves. I have 6 shelves of RPG books. I don't have a favorite system.
Your favorite system is the IKEA bookshelf of all of your systems.
Yes, exactly.
You'd be the guy selling the display cabinet full of systems, not the systems themselves.
It's like, well, what should I roll? What tabletop role playing game should I pick up? I don't know. What do you like? What's your favorite? I don't know. What am I into right now?
You'll like the second question, Dan, but keeping on the first question before I go to that, Xeno guy.
So to me, the answer to that is a lot easier, and it's a lot easier for a specific reason. I would recommend OSR because, and Cold, you can sit there and roll your eyes at OSR all you like. The thing about the OSR is it's built off of one of the most enduring engines of tabletop role playing that has ever been. It's based off of, I said enduring.
Traveler still played.
What does OSR stand for?
OSR stands for Old School Revival. It is a movement of role-playing gamers that went back to mostly pre-Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and pulling those old rules back into the modern zeitgeist. The reason that I would recommend it to new players is because a lot of OSR games, not all of them, a lot of OSR games are simpler. They're both rules light and roleplay focused, because those are two different spectrums. and so they're easy to get into and to play. But because it's a huge number of games that are all very similar and mostly interoperable, so you can learn one game and then apply it in a lot of different settings. Because the difference between a modern horror OSR game and a high fantasy one are in smaller differences than the difference between, say, Earth Dawn and Shadowrun. So it's a good thing to get into because it can be very. It's basically the TTRPG equivalent of transferable skills. You learn the baseline and you can apply it to a lot of different things. And I just like the baseline.
I think that's easy for players, but I think that's very difficult for GMs, for a new GM.
Yeah, and I think it would be the solution to that would be, because the OSR is so huge and interoperable, there are a lot of products that would be good for a new GM that specifically does give them one of those settings with a lot of specific rules that you were talking about. Things like that exist for the OSR, and one of the beauties of that is because different OSR games are similar, you can use, after you've mastered one of those settings, you can apply other rules to it. The thing that makes the OSR so interesting from my perspective is that it lays out that whole buffet. And once to start with, you just get the Happy Meal and you sit down and you do the thing out of one book. And as you get better, you can draw from loads of different games to pull them all together. Whereas if you're playing Shadowrun, you just have Shadowrun. And if it wasn't written for Shadowrun, it won't work. But that's just my style. And I would sell that because I think I would sell that to a new player, specifically because as you learn it, it expands what you can do.
All right, for the second question, let's say you come around somebody who says, I've been doing TTRPG, but only D&D for the longest time. I'm tired of D&D. I want to go to something different. What would you recommend for somebody who wants to try something that's not just D&D Light or D&D Alternative? So no Pathfinder, even though I love Pathfinder.
Yeah.
That was me. Within like 6 months to a year of playing Pathfinder, I went, okay, I'm bored. What else is there?
Real quick, does anybody know the system of GURPS? GURPS?
Yeah, we both are familiar.
Yeah, that's
we know
that's
Steve
one of the
Jackson.
That's one of the crunchiest ones.
It is the crunchiest universalist system there is.
Yeah, when you say crunchiest, what does that mean?
Lots of
numbers.
rules.
Numbers.
There's
crunching. Okay,
there is a system. There is a lot of verisimilitude. Oh, I can't do it.
Verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude.
Bless you.
My brain was not wanting to say that word with my mouth. In it, which they are. I understand the idea to be more simulationist. I don't necessarily agree with it. There are conceits that have to be made. But someone that's playing for... Because, again, that was me. I literally played 6 months, a year of Pathfinder and went, I want to do technology, and I can't do that in Pathfinder. I want to have a giant robot suit. I can't do that in Pathfinder. I want to be Gene Starwind and have a cool spell gun and be and at the time I could not do that in Pathfinder. They did make Spellslinger, but still that's not the same because you're not charismatic as a wizard. So anyway, not to digress, I would, if they're looking for I would actually ask them what they're looking for that D&D isn't giving them, and then suggest stuff off of that. As a general, my journey's weird on that because the systems that I played after D&D were Shadowrun 4th edition. I did not play L5R. I never got to play that. And then a Unisystem game, which didn't last that long, and then Vampire. And I got into Vampire and played a lot of World Darkness because I love vampires and vampire myths, and playing with them, they're fun. I like undead in general. Undead are cool people. Necromancy is a stigma that we need to... It's not evil. It can be good.
I'm not touching that one. So to me, I think that, especially going in the spirit of this conversation, and like Cold said, there's what do you want that D&D isn't giving you? And since you constructed this question specifically to not be the answer not be OSR, because my answer to everything is OSR, but it is kind of D&D light, and if they're wanting to move away from that, I would say if they want to get crunchier, if they want to go in the more options focused direction.
Are you gonna say the dark eye?
No.
Thank God.
I was gonna say.
Thank God. That's an awful system.
I don't know enough about it to speak, but I'll take your word for it, because if even you think it's bad, it's probably bad.
Do you want to roll to do 3 tests to do anything?
Well,
you gotta have the dexterity to be able to climb the wall. You gotta have the constitution to be able to have enough wherewithal to climb the wall, and then you have to
have strength to pull yourself up.
Yeah, that's why I hate dark eye. It's like, no, that is unnecessary.
Like that. Yeah, that sounds bad. So I would say if you want something crunchier, look into the Warhammer RPGs.
Age of Sigmar.
Either, and me thinking old stuff is usually better. Even just the old Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, or any of the. I don't hate the Fantasy Flight 40K role playing games. They're weird.
I actually prefer the Ulysses one.
Ulysses. Is that I'm okay?
I say it like Steve Harvey would if he was played by.
But something like that, because those games are very distinct from D&D. You're going from a D20 to a D100, and you're doing a lot more roll under. The skills work differently, and there's a lot of cool options. And the thing about the 40K universe is there's lots of cool stuff in the 40K universe, and they reflect that by having a lot of weird and interesting options that change how you play your character.
That was the third game I ever GM'd in my career was Rogue Trader.
Yeah, so Rogue Trader. Black Crusade is the one that they use a lot of the rules for. Most of the people that I talk to play with the Black Crusade rules and just use all the options out of the other books. Deathwatch, that's the one where you actually get to play as
Space Marines.
Yeah.
Yep. Deathwatch, Space Marines, Only War is Imperial Guard, Black Crusade is Chaos, Rogue Trader is Rogue Trader, and then Dark Heresy is
the Inquisition.
Yeah, which is like the least powered of them all.
Yes, but only because the Only War one gives you like extra bodies to throw around.
Yeah,
because a guardsman is less powerful than an Inquisitor, but
you don't play as the Inquisitor in Dark Heresy.
No, you play as like the acolytes until you go up to the level of the
you start off like Imperial Guardsman is one of the things you can play as that.
Yeah. So yes, I would say that would be a good direction to go if you want more crunch. If you want to go with less, I don't like Blades in the Dark. A lot of people like Blades in the Dark. It has its own setting. It has interesting stuff in that setting. If you find a GM who likes Blades in the Dark and is good at running it, I'm sure it's a really good system. Something else that's less that isn't just D&D.
You got to ask him what type of autism he has, and that'll let you know what they want to play.
That'll help.
Because people that enjoy Mage the Ascension are the type of autism that likes to have philosophical debates while playing a game.
Yeah, that would be in that direction. Honestly, most of the rules that I know about, just because that's the circle that I run in, are going to be OSR, so they're kind of disqualified. But Blades in the Dark would be where I start. If they really just want to do theater kid stuff, Fate is fine for that. That's where I would go. Yeah, Blades in the Dark or Fate, probably.
The Genesis,
especially because if
Genesis was a fun game, but they got discontinued.
If somebody comes to you and says, "I want to play something that's like D&D, but D&D has too many rules," they're probably a theater kid and want to enjoy Blades of the Dark or Fate.
Yeah, they're if they think there's too many rules, then they want to go more towards that.
But if they come to me and say, "Hey, I like D&D 5th edition, but the way the characters work, I don't like that," I would recommend OSR because it strips out a lot of the unnecessary fluff, in my opinion, in 5th edition. And if they want to play something that's just more of a game, I would say Pathfinder 1st edition or 3.5 would be good, because don't make that face. It was popular for a reason.
Yeah, just because it's popular doesn't mean it's good. I
Yeah,
will.
no.
I am the kid that goes, I hate D20 systems.
Yeah, I know. Just roll 2d10. Does that help your fifis? Rolling 2d10 instead of a d20.
If I'm rolling 2 dice, let's go Traveler. I'm rolling 2d6 to roll on tables.
I don't hate that.
I love Traveler is probably one of the most simple systems, and there's a lot of fun with it. The problem is it is very married to its setting of you are in space.
Yeah, Traveler is one of the things that I want to get to the table, but the problem with that is I don't want to run it because
it's stupid. It is a game I have ran as a back burner game. No one else wants to run. I'm already running a bunch of games. You can run Traveler with minimum effort. In fact, it's requires so little effort on the DM part is literally calls you the referee.
Referee was the common term for the dungeon master for a long time.
I'm aware. It's just one of those things of like, if you have players that are like, I like to go do my own thing, you get to with Traveler, you get to go, cool, go do your own thing. I'll just sit here and I'll get to play NPCs, and if you want whatever you do, tell me. I'll roll on the appropriate table to have the thing happen for what you're doing.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I would say I want to play in a Traveler game before I run it, because I feel like I don't understand it well enough. And
I never got to play in it. I only got to run it.
Hey, if you're running one online,
no, I'm not. Not right now.
No, but I mean, if you are in the future and you're looking for players, hit me up.
I will.
It'd be fun to do something in the Discord where it doesn't seem like enough people's schedules would line up to make an official thing.
The problem is that your Discord it's not focused on TTRPGs. If you were to advertise in places that are focused on TTRPGs, you'd be able to find enough people. I'm going to be running things online. If you want me to be posting information about them in the Discord, then I definitely will. That's how I got into Cold's game.
Yeah, that's how I need to get more players for the Shadowrun game.
And then if you want me to run it in, the problem is that if I run it in the Dungeons and Dragons or in the Dragon's Treasure thing, that basically just means we have to create a bunch of new tables specifically for the game, specifically so that people who aren't playing the game can see it. And I don't know if that's going to be I don't think that's an environment conducive to roleplay, really. Because then you're just playing behind glass, as opposed to what Cold's doing, which is he has his own Discord server that he pulled people into to play.
I mean, it depends on how you're running the game, because I know a lot of living campaign games. That's how they do it.
They basically parasitize an existing Discord channel.
They can, or they can. I've seen that. I've also seen, but it depends on their size, because eventually, if everyone that plays
start
the
getting
game,
huge, yeah. Then they can drown out the rest of the. They can drown out the rest of the server.
But it's not uncommon.
T-Man, one of the things that I want to do, and I started working on this previously, and then I fell off it because the system I picked was wrong. Mm-hmm. I want to do one of those West Marches pickup campaigns. I'm getting a new rule set that I kickstarted. It's coming in January. It is a OSR, but leaning more towards the advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I have a Discord server that I was running it in. I only managed to get a couple of sessions out. When that comes back in, I could retool that. And if you add a couple of channels specific to it, I can run it in the Dragon's Treasure Discord and pull in the couple of people from outside the Dragon's Treasure Discord into it, which will bring more blood into that Discord, and it'll have something that's actively happening in your Discord. If you think that that'll bring whatever you're looking for, I can consider that. The only thing I would need is maybe a dice roller, depending on how I wind up doing that, or if I wind up using Owlbear Rodeo or whatever.
Yeah, that can work.
If you want people milling around your server doing stuff that's outside of the usual thing, I might be able to make that work.
I mean, it's still within the bounds of what the Discord is meant for. So
Yeah.
I
It
don't
would
see
just
too much
be
of a
it
problem.
would be an additional channel, because you wouldn't want people gumming up the Vigigames channel with stuff about this
probably
specific game.
couple separate channels.
Yeah, probably one for in character, one for out of character, and one for rules questions,
Yeah,
and then maybe one for announcements.
I mean, I can just make a single channel just for that specific thing.
Yeah, and then have threads. That probably wouldn't be the worst. Is there a thing in Discord where you can cause threads to not expire? Because that's something that I've run into.
I think
normally I do categories and then channels off that category.
I have that
Yeah.
right now. I have to manually delete them. For example, in AI Musings, there's 2 active threads because I did the /write thing, and they're still there even though nobody's talking in it.
That's because
So,
threads kind of disappear because they
People
get lost.
unsubscribed from them. Yeah, I think it would be more. I think, like Cold said, it would be better to have like a channel category, and then people can just hide the whole category. But I mean, if that's something you want, I'm super down for that, because it would give a permanent influx of new people that might be interested in it without me having to go out and pull people into it.
And I just added a
I
dice
like
roller
that
to
idea.
the I just added a dice roller to the Discord. So
Oh, which one?
There's
it's
a lot
just
of
called
those.
dice roller.
And a lot of
Yeah.
them I don't like, if I'm being honest.
But I know almost all of them.
Alright, this one, let's see the actions. Special positive dice that add extra actions.
Actually,
Multiplayer.
the one I use for Shadowrun, I'm not the biggest fan of. It just has a lot of Shadowrun actions.
Yeah, it does Shadowrun specific stuff, which is very helpful some of the time, and some of the time it is such a pain.
They just need to get rid of the bracket system that make it way better.
Yeah.
But hey, I know people that have made Discord dice rolling bots for things, and I don't want to be one of those people.
Yeah, I started building one, and I did feature bloat before I got it working in the first place, and that was a big mistake.
I've had programmer friends that program stuff for fun on the side, and I just go, if I'm doing something, even though I love my job, I'm doing it on the side. If I'm not getting paid, I have a hard time justifying spending my time to do that. I'm weird though.
Alright, so with all of that, we've been going for about an hour and a half now. I think that just about sums up all the things we want to discuss. Feel like we made some progress going in all different directions.
Yeah,
Make
like I
sure
said,
have all my-
I think
Every
it
which
makes-
way but loose.
Honestly, I think that Cold and I don't really disagree substantively. I think that there's probably some.
The problem is
Linguistic quibbles?
it's semantics, and I am anti-semantic.
Yeah, and I can see that.
Wait a minute.
I'm not going to change how I talk about things just because Cole doesn't like that I'm calling out games that he likes.
I mean, I have problems with those games too. It is literally just the words.
Yeah, and I see why you have those quibbles.
I know we're both very hard-headed. It's fine. I'll keep constantly memeing you. You'll meme me. That's the way of the internet.
Memes.
Trust me, I've seen this debate on /TG with all the other elegant gentlemen in the back of the old days, or fat guys if you want to use those are both used for TG back in the day. Probably still are.
I wish I was old guard enough to have memories of the days back before 4chan was whatever it is now.
Dude, I remember when 8chan became a thing because everyone hated what 4chan turned into.
What happened to 8chan?
It got nuked. and then everyone back to 4chan, and then 8chan got restarted again, but it wasn't by Hot Wheels. Hot Wheels kind of dropped doing all that stuff and moved on, just kind of like Moot did. So it's
Someone says
it is
4chan is just Reddit now.
except for you don't have to sign in.
You know what I miss? 7 Clams. That was my thing, and most people didn't even know it existed. It had its own little music section where it just plays music in the background, and I loved that. One of my favorite memories is me and my best friend. We picked up a copy of Warriors Orochi 3, which is the first time I've ever played a game like that. I didn't even know Three Kingdoms existed. And so we began to play this thing. I found it really surprising that Miyamoto Musashi was in it. And so I looked up the game and I saw that it was related to other real-life people, and I think that's when I began my downward spiral into Three Kingdoms. It's a lot of fun things, because one of the things we did, we started to play in the hardest difficulty with like level 1 characters.
Mm-hmm.
Except we would get on a horse and we just run around hitting people with the horses. If we get knocked off, we will run around with like chickens with their head cut off.
That's
and so we would on the horse and having fun. We played one of the themes from The Matrix called Navras, and it was just like this, just deep, epic, amazing song. And then anytime anyone got knocked off the horse, we would
start
switch
playing
it
the
to
Benny Hill theme.
Yes, the Benny Hill theme. Oh, that's good.
Fantastic.
Memories. All right, so with all of that, it looks like everyone is all nice and set. Thank you all who have joined us, all who are watching the VOD, and we will see you next time. Next week, I'm thinking about having some kind of fundraiser / donathon, because I want to get me a new printer. I feel like this one does not do the justice to the colors of the waifus.
Oh, I was gonna say colors. Never mind. I would recommend a Brother laser printer.
Yeah,
but
that's exactly what I was gonna say.
But the color ones are really expensive. Even the black and white one I got is like $200.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You want to have
The toner is way cheaper than ink.
Oh yeah, and it prints way faster. When you got to print like 15 character sheets for a game, and then you're doing a lot of handouts,
It doesn't
it's
jam.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Well, it will jam if you start using fancy paper.
Well, yeah, but just don't use fancy paper.
Like this.
What?
This paper right here.
Oh,
Does not
Ooh.
like to be fed into a laser printer.
With the rollers, yeah, I could imagine.
Oh yeah, I got like 3 copies done, and then it was like, oh nope, it's not. It's just jamming constantly now.
Yeah, no. In terms of color, I would still say if you can't, especially with you being small business, and so you're going to be using it a lot. Some toner is going to be better than inkjet. It's just color toner it's its own deal.
Or I mean, for like labels and stuff that you need a heat printer.
yeah, specifically for the waifus is what I am looking
Yeah.
for.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
So
you
yeah,
need-
for waifus,
But,
yeah.
but the other thing you got to remember is the waifus are on sticker paper, and so that's going to be even more of a pain because it's got that extra thickness. And imagine it getting crumpled in the drums of a laser printer and
I don't have to
unpeeling,
imagine.
Now,
and then sticking all up in there.
I don't have to imagine.
I will say, I will say, as long as it's not been the Lakota paper with the hard edge, the other Lakota paper is fine. Lakota, whatever it's called.
I would say Lakota,
fancy-
kinda like Dakota.
Fancy Himalayan paper
Yeah,
that makes it look like
All
it's
that-
old paper.
all that faux-stificated stuff.
Well, I do it because I'm going to be handing out handouts in my Earth Dawn game, and I wanted the paper to look like stuff that would be apropos of a pre Bronze Age civilization.
What you should do is antique the paper after you print it. So print out the handout and then singe edges, soak it in coffee, and throw it in the oven.
It's already got that like dye, that natural papyrus color to it.
Yeah, I'm saying if you wanted to do that again, instead of getting fancy paper, print it on normal paper. But first get normal paper, print it, and then do the antiquing.
But it doesn't have that woven feel.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
thread
that's,
feel.
that-
Yeah,
you could get resume paper that has some of that, not as much. And anything that's going to be that fancy where it feels woven is going to not go through printers well.
like I said, the only problem with that is the edges. The other ones that I got are a lot thinner and they don't have that crazy edge. They run through it fine.
Okay, that's good.
I think I've had one jam, but
Yeah. The other thing is I do that so infrequently, buying specific paper for it doesn't make sense. I just use the paper I already have, and then antiquing it after you print it works.
I just have I make bad financial decisions for my hobbies.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've got 2 3D printers sitting over there, so I can understand that.
All right. So with all of that, gentlemen, let's wrap it up. I'm, of course, the T-Man.
I'm Cold Frost.
And Xenoguy, you can find all of us at the Dragon's Treasure.
I do
Discord.
have a Rumble channel.
The link-
Subscribe.
Don't do that.
Cold Frost commentary. It's great.
If you do too many of those, they'll have to start sending him money, and you don't want that.
I would love to start getting money. I'm a very poor tradesman.
I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to all the people that might be suckered into following you.
Oh.
No, if you want to continue this conversation, go to the Dragon's Treasure shop, and there's a link to the Discord there. You can find us there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
while you're at the shop, buy something.
It's buy tea. It's very good. Mana potion's out. Never mind. I was about to say mana potion's delicious.
Yeah, I'm waiting for more ingredients.
If you like Earl Grey, Sebastian's is really good. That's my second favorite tea.
T-Man's going to love me because I'm going to tell you that the Speedwagon Foundation tea is one of the favorites that I've had, and that one's members only, so you have to send him even more money.
Mm-hmm.
True Blood is members only. No, or is it not anymore? It was.
True Blood?
Yeah, Vampire Blood.
Oh, Vampire Juice.
Vampire Juice. Sorry, I said I will still call it True Blood.
Vampire
I know what
Juice
you mean.
was... So the way my system works is that I have some teas that are members exclusive, meaning only members can get it.
Mhm.
And then every 2 months, which reminds me, I got to do the new system. Or not the new system, a new whatever. Every 2 months, I rotate the teas based on what ingredients I have and what people say will be available. So it's not just willy-nilly. It's based on inventory.
Lavender Lemon
Just-
is also really good.
Yeah, it's why I made the system to begin with. It had nothing to do with me trying to...
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with me trying to, like, pull people into signing up for Dragon's Wings. It was specifically to just... You know what I'm saying. Inventory maintenance. Not maintenance, but management. All right, and so with all of that, farewell, everybody, and come on by to the Discord. Farewell.
Aye.
Bye.